All right, everybody. Instant reaction time here on a Tuesday afternoon. Josh Callaway, Collin Candy, Tom Green with you. Bombshell news on Tuesday as Oklahoma has announced that quarterback John Mateer is going to have surgery on his throwing hand. He's going to miss some time. Michael Hawkins will start against Kent State next weekend. They didn't really commit to anything beyond that. Fellas, wow. Obviously, let me backtrack. More context. The injury happened in the first quarter against Auburn on Saturday. He obviously played through it the rest of the game, probably gives you a little more insight as to why he was kind of shaky in the first half on Saturday. Ended up playing very well in the second half. Oklahoma wins. They came back the last couple of days and decided that they do want to go ahead and have surgery. He's going to have the surgery tomorrow, and that's where obviously he's now going to miss some time. First reaction right out of the gates here, guys, for you. Obviously, John is at the top of the Heisman race. Oklahoma is 4-0, and he's a ginormous part of that as a starting quarterback. And he's now going to miss some time. I mean, they said they fully expect him to be back this year, but obviously, I mean, you got Texas coming up on the horizon. Like, this is a huge, huge blow for Oklahoma, no matter how long it is, because he's John Mateer. He's the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, like, regardless of how long he's out, I mean, the timeline appears to be about a month is what we're hearing right now. That's tough. I mean, on one hand, like, it is better now than when you get to like mid-October or late October and in the meat of that SEC schedule, because you do have the bye week, you do have Kent State, so that buys you a little bit of time there, especially as you're trying to get Michael Hawkins prepared to start an SEC play. But being without, a guy like you just said, who is a Heisman frontrunner right now, who is number 2 in the country in total offense per game, knows Ben Arbuckle's offense like the back of his now injured right hand, is brutal for them. I mean, I just don't know what other words to use other than it's just a very tough blow for Oklahoma when it seemed like, this season was getting off to about as good of a start as they could have hoped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beyond the recognition and the accolades being thrown around John's name, I mean, this is simply put a quarterback that has elevated Oklahoma in its 2 biggest contests this year. And to not have that presence in some meaningful outings moving forward, that's a massive blow. Just when you think that Oklahoma bucks this trend of meaningful, significant injuries, here we sit today kind of talking about similar stuff from a really adverse season a year ago. It's obviously brutal. I don't want to skip past this without saying that I feel for John Mateer. I'm sure that this is crushing for him. I feel for a lot of the Oklahoma coaching staff. I'm sure that once you get rolling, you really feel like you have an opportunity to really change the narrative around this program significantly. And now they'll certainly still have an opportunity to do that. But without Mateer for at least the next few weeks, who knows what this is going to look like for the Sooners.
Yeah, like Tom said, I mean, if you want to do the spin zone here for what's obviously horrendous news, there's not a lot of positive you can take from it. It is the timing. The timing is really as good as you could hope for in the middle of the season, right? I mean, they have this week off, and then they play Kent State next weekend. So, and then Texas right down the Cotton Bowl. So with all due respect to Kent State next weekend, Oklahoma basically has 3 weeks to get Michael Hawkins ready for the Red River rivalry, right? And we can talk about the Michael Hawkins aspect in a minute. But for you guys, I mean, it doesn't feel like, as crushing as this is, because it is, it's a body blow, it's a gut punch, all that. Doesn't feel like it sinks the season, right? Because, I mean, you have an opening here with a extremely winnable game next week, no matter who's at quarterback. And then, hopefully you can get him back before you get into that real big stretch run down the rest of the season. First off, you can afford to lose games in an expanded playoff anyway, but then also you include the fact that the committee will be, hopefully wise to the fact that, like, any games that they lose without Mateer, like, get a little bit of, like, not a pass for them, but, they're looked at a little bit differently. It doesn't feel like this is season ending, right? It just made things a lot harder. Is that fair for you guys? Because, again, it's like you're going to get them back, in theory, hopefully in the next few weeks to a month.
Yeah, I memean, like, I think the optimistic way to look at it is that you get him back for probably Ole Miss toward the end of October there. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, like, if they struggle in some of these games coming up, especially against Texas and that defense, on the road at South Carolina with Michael Hawkins starting those games, it's like when John Mateer comes back and if they look as good as they did through these first 4 games, is that something that the committee takes into consideration? It's like, hey, they were without their starting quarterback and a guy who, like you said, was a early season Heisman front runner here. How does that get weighed into the equation when we start talking about the college football playoff? And of course, there's still a lot of season left, and Oklahoma has a lot of work to do to get into that conversation. But they're the number 7 team in the country right now. Like, you are going to be in the college football playoff conversation if we're looking at it today. But yeah, I mean, it's just difficult blow. Like you mentioned, best timing you could get as far as like being in the season. But, priority number 1 right now has to be getting Michael Hawkins prepared to play Texas again.
Yeah, I don't want to minimize the loss, obviously, but I think you guys hit the nail on the head. I would argue specifically this specific portion of the season is when you would want this type of injury to be dealt. I mean, they've got the Michigan win now under their belt. That type of meaningful victory is officially in that record. They got the SEC opener. They won the game against Jackson Arnold. They're officially 1-0 in conference play. Michael Hawkins has played in the Red River game before, so while it is difficult to have your backup guy go in there, he knows what that environment is like, and I'm sure that he's going to be well equipped to handle that with that prior experience, and then all this ample time to work towards that. And honestly, if he does miss the South Carolina game, that being Mateer, that South Carolina game now looks a little bit different the way that the season has played out. And so obviously it's going to be difficult. But this specific stretch, I do think, is relatively favorable for Oklahoma to navigate this thing. And then when Mateer returns, as you're talking about, the season is still very much ahead of this team, and a lot can still be accomplished whenever they get into the back end of that schedule. And some of the most difficult games on that slate, you'd think you'd get Mateer back for them. It's awful to deal with this now, but this is, in my opinion, the time frame you would rather have this come down the wire.
Yeah, the most optimistic timeline is like 3 weeks, right? That's kind of what's been floated around. He's getting the surgery tomorrow, right? So 3 weeks to put you the Wednesday of the South Carolina game. So like Tom said, probably most realistic would be Ole Miss at home that following weekend. I mean, obviously, it goes without saying, we all have gotten to know John pretty good the last 8-9 months. If he is capable, he will try to play, right? I mean, as soon as he possibly can. I imagine that he is going to attempt to play against Texas that week. That's not saying he will. I don't expect him to, frankly, because, again, that is a really fast timeline. But you have to know he's going to try, right? He's going to lobby for it. He's going to push for it that week. But to Collin's point, Michael Hawkins played in the game last year. And, I mean, again, we talked about kind of earlier in the season going into the year, nobody's looking for this offense to go score 50 points, right? The defense is phenomenal, right? You just need the offense to be serviceable. And, with what Michael Hawkins even did last year, but you certainly fully expect him to have made a jump, he could be ready to handle this. And Oklahoma could very well still win games with Michael Hawkins. Let's go there. Tom, for you, Michael Hawkins taking over. He's going to start against Kent State, presumably probably against Texas, maybe against South Carolina. What are your expectations for him? Obviously, we saw him a little bit last year. He made a few starts. There was some good. That Auburn game was crazy. Some bad. South Carolina, where he got benched. They went back to Jackson Arnold. Obviously, it's year 2 for him. Brent Venables has spoken very highly of the jump he has made under Ben Arbuckle in his second year in college football. Can Oklahoma weather the storm with him? What are some expectations, some realistic ones for Michael Hawkins now running the show?
Yeah, I think you have to be cautiously optimistic. Look, Michael Hawkins is not John Mateer. Like, let's get that out of the way. He's not going to play as well as John Mateer has played through these first 4 games. But we've heard from Brent, we've heard from Ben Arbuckle that, the growth that Michael Hawkins Jr. has made from, when Ben Arbuckle got here in December to, the start, through fall camp into the start of the season was more than his growth throughout last year. We've only seen him minimally so far this season. In that Temple game, he completed 1 of 3 passes for 5 yards, had another 25 yards rushing when they were basically just trying to run out the clock at the end of that game, not do anything too fancy on offense. But I think the reason that there should be some cautious optimism here is that, like you mentioned, he's played in the Red River game before. So he's not going to go in there feeling shaken. He's played in SEC games. He's played on the road. Obviously, that Auburn game was huge. But the other part of it is he's got a better roster around him offensively right now, especially if they can get, Jake Michael and Fabechi Wiwu and Michael Fasusi, get those ankles healed up during the bye week heading into Kent State. And, even we'll see how much those guys play against Kent State because you want them healthy for Texas. But just having a better offensive line, you've got Deion Burks healthy, you've got Isaiah Satania coming into his own, you've got Keontae Lewis making some good plays. We're expecting Giovanni Gibson to probably be back after the bye week too.
Yeah.
And Jaron Kanik, what he's done at tight end, still leading the nation among tight ends and receiving. There are better pieces to put Michael Hawkins in a position to succeed. So I think that there is reason to be optimistic about what he can do. But, I mean, this offense I just don't think is going to look as good as it has through these first 4 games with him in control there.
Yeah, Josh, quickly to what you were talking about, we have to acknowledge the fact that John Mateer handling adversity the way that he did and doing what he did in that Auburn game with this injury going 16-17 in the back end.
Crazy.
And handling that injury that well. I mean, that's insane. But handling adversity is something that Michael Hawkins has already had to navigate in his young career. And I think the other part of this too, guys, is you talk about the timing of this injury, right? This essentially gives Oklahoma roughly 2.5 weeks to install almost new offensive system to fit Michael Hawkins' skill set. I mean, this could allow Ben Arbuckle to structure something that highlights Michael Hawkins' running ability, the speed and burst that he features.
Yeah.
It could essentially provide a whole new element to this offensive approach that now Texas has to prepare for, maybe a South Carolina has to prepare for, which should, in theory, give Michael Hawkins another leg up on top of what Tom's talking about with some of these better personnel around him and then maybe an injury or two in terms of return helping him around him. So I like the fact that they're going to be able to essentially give Michael Hawkins time to see what he likes, what he doesn't like, build chemistry with this new look offense, and then give his opponents a lot to prepare for with that athletic ability built in. It sets up fairly well. You don't want to set expectations too high. He's going to face a difficult test ahead if he does play against Texas and South Carolina, but at the very least, considering the timing and the personnel, this sets up much better for Michael Hawkins to look like the player he's capable of being.
Yeah, and it's a better position for him than last season when you're talking about he was not being prepared as a starter when he gets thrown in there right before halftime of the SEC opener against Tennessee, and then had a week to turn around and prepare for his first ever start on the road at Auburn. Before they had a bye week before that Texas game last year. And obviously, it's a better coaching situation too with Ben Arbuckle, Zieski in there as opposed to Seth Luttrell, who obviously didn't have as much experience working hands-on with quarterbacks. So I think that those, that brain trust there of Arbuckle and Kuzieski is going to do everything they can to get Michael Hawkins prepared for these next 2 or 3 starts, whatever it may be.
Yeah, you read my mind because that was my thought was obviously, to your point earlier, the roster is in a far better place than when Hawkins played last year. He has a better O-line. He has more weapons on the outside, no doubt. But probably the biggest change in his favor is that he has Ben Arbuckle this time. And they have a few weeks here, 2 weeks, and then, Kent State plus into the Texas week to kind of gear the offense around him. And, you see some of this QB run game that they've been doing with John Mateer. Why couldn't Michael Hawkins do that? I mean, we know what Hawkins is as an athlete, like kind of building the offense around more his skill set. Now, I'll admit, too, when he got the only run he's gotten this year was against Temple. I wasn't real impressed that day leaving the stadium from Philadelphia, but watching the game back that following Monday, there were some plays that were really close to hitting. And I even mentioned on that Monday pod, he had one that 60, 70-yard touchdown it would have been to Elijah Thomas, where the defender just tackled Elijah Thomas for a PI. Like, he had some pretty throws. And again, I keep repeating it, but they're not going to throw him out there saying, okay, go win a shootout, Michael Hawkins. Like, they're going to ride their defense. They're going to keep it conservative. They're going to let him run the ball, I'm assuming, and they're going to try and win that way. They're going to try and grind out a low-scoring win, which is what this roster is kind of built to do anyway, right? So it's a huge blow. I'm not at all going to say like they have an equal chance to beat Texas with Hawkins as they would with Mateer. That's ridiculous. But they don't have no chance either. Like there's a path here for Oklahoma to still win games with Michael Hawkins. I really do believe that.
Well, and I also want to echo something to Tom's point. We also know that Ben Arbuckle specifically, you talk about the growth of Michael Hawkins as a player. Ben Arbuckle specifically has gone out of his way repeatedly to say, I love this guy. I think he's got an incredibly high ceiling. He has raved about the talent and potential here. It's just that potential is going to have to get maximized a little bit quicker within this offensive structure. But also, Josh, kind of to what you're talking about, what I guess I'm curious about now is how much does Oklahoma lean into Hawkins' running ability versus now knowing he's the only guy they have at quarterback? I mean, that you would really like to rely on in a starting setting. Because if he were to go down, knock on wood, then who knows what happens next, right? And so striking that balance is going to have to be taken into consideration for Oklahoma. But at the end of the day, you got to make the most of this player's abilities. And I think that Ben Arbuckle knows exactly how to do that. It's just going to have to all kind of come to terms over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and to Josh's point, it's like you're not going to ask him to go out there and win a shootout, and with this defense, you're not going to need him to do that. I think we were joking on the podcast yesterday. It's like, is that Texas game like going to be 14-10 at this point? And that was with a healthy John Mateer. It's like,
right,
with those two defenses, that could be a very low-scoring affair in Dallas in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I also want to quickly mention too, Josh, Tom. Now, if you're Oklahoma staff, you're looking at these running backs going, hey, now's the time. I mean, if there were ever a moment in time within the season for Oklahoma's running game to get going out of the backfield, it would be now with John Mateer out. You really would rather not have Michael Hawkins carry the load through the air and on the ground. OU's running backs have struggled to a degree out of the gate in this season. Well, I am fascinated to see what they now do with this potentially new look workload, because they ultimately could determine the way OU navigates John Mateer being out.
Bombshell news on a Tuesday. It's been a crazy day in the state already. Mike Gundy getting let go after coaching Oklahoma State for 20 years. And OU got hit today too, as John Mateer's going to have surgery tomorrow on the throwing hand. Like Collin said, just sucks for John. I mean, you wouldn't say this probably completely eliminates him from the Heisman, but it puts a giant blow on it. I mean, he's the favorite right now. It's super early in the year, but that just sucks. And he wants to be out there so bad. And that's why I said before, like, if there's any chance at all he's going to try and push to get in there against Texas, he will try. Again, I don't expect that by any means, but he'll try, just getting to know him the last 8-9 months or so. But huge blow. Any final thoughts before we get out of here? We'll have more time to react to it. The Kent State game just got way more interesting, by the way. That was like the most boring game of the season. It just got way more interesting going into that weekend. But any final thoughts here?
My final thought was honestly just that. What do they show in this Kent State game? How do they handle the Kent State game? How long are they willing to keep Michael Hawkins in? I think it's a really good point. I know we're joking about it, but man, that Kent State game looks a lot different in terms of its importance the rest of the way. I honestly am fascinated to see what the Sooners are going to put on tape against the Golden Flashes, because I have no idea,
That suddenly became a very valuable game. Like they have to take advantage of that. Kind of like they did against Illinois State, where John Mateer basically he did. He played the whole game. I would think probably going to be the same for Michael Hawkins. Yeah. They need to get him reps in this offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say the other interesting factor here is we know that Oklahoma would ideally like to preserve Michael Hawkins' red shirt. And if we're talking about, a potential month, recovery for John Mateer, that is Kent State, that's Texas, that's South Carolina, that gets into 4 games in the regular season. So you kind of really want to, you don't want to rush John Mateer back, but you also kind of want to expedite that recovery process for him so that you can hopefully still maintain that red shirt for Michael Hawkins Jr.
It's a good point. We'll have a lot more time to talk about it. Crazy news on a Tuesday. John Mateer throwing thumb on his throwing hand, surgery Wednesday. The timeline will be heavily discussed. I'm sure Brett Venables will be asked about it double-digit times between now and whenever John does finally return. But for now, it's the Michael Hawkins show. We know that for at least next weekend. And again, next weekend just got a lot more interesting than I think it would have been before. That's it for now. Full coverage of everything over on the website, oklahoma247sports.com, and a lot more of the kind of the fallout here. As we'll continue to discuss and analyze. Collin and I will be back on the podcast on Thursday, hit some other stuff. Obviously, again, we mentioned the Oklahoma State opening earlier, some OU ties there. We'll certainly get into that on Thursday. A very busy Tuesday around here, but that's it for now. John Mateer, surgery, going to be out for a few weeks. That's it. For Tom Green, Collin Kennedy, I'm Josh Callaway. See you next time right back here as always on Sooners Illustrated.